So there's this resistance there to the idea of a psychological characterization, which a lot of people would expect in a novel.
Yes, I remember, I know this sounds like a lot of anecdotes of the writers, but somebody said to Georges Perec once when he was planning the book, and he had this whole bunch of numbers on the ground and he was moving them around, because this person said, but what about the motivations? He said, I will add those later. Yeah, he just wanted to get the movements right according to his pre-plan, and then he would add the motivations, because in a sense they're the easiest thing to add, because our literary processes are set up to build motivations, and readers will intuit them in the most precise and subtle way, and the most minimal of clues, because we're so narratively attuned and we're so imbued with every possible trope and device, partially through being bathed in television from an early age, but also through all the books and all the comics and all the rest, that we don't need many hints to supply all that.
The characters eventually sort of they go through several different scenarios. I think there's two parts to the story, isn't there, that second story, and they go through this labyrinth of tunnels at the end, and then they are all separated at the end into different sort of compartments, and there's the final sort of thing that happens is there's a kind of a marriage between this strange hermit who lives in a cave and in this weird zone.
There I think the reader's beginning to get an idea that these patterns are not recurring simply by chance or for any reason except that there's an obsession on the part of the person constructing the book with these kinds of patterns. Very forgiving, malleable women with tyrannical, scarred, difficult men. So it's as if somebody's working something out through almost very hackneyed plot machinery. Yeah, the tools they have to hand, which are genre fictions of various kinds.
I wanted to ask you perhaps a little bit about some of the things that come through in the story, like there's a bit of poetry in that story.
Well, I guess originally I did have this kind of Georges Perec idea of first, second and third person narratives kind of alternating constantly and telling a story by advancing stages, but I found that the third person part seemed kind of excessive and unnecessary. You know, you didn't actually need three, you only really needed two. And I thought, but there were bits in the other narrative, the PI's narrative, which I thought should stay, and I guess my principle is always to take away scaffolding until you see just how little or how much you actually need. And I found that the poems and the texts juxtaposed with the rest seemed to me to kind of strengthen rather than weaken it. They sort of pointed at some of the things that were going on in the text, but they also invited you to step back from it and kind of see it in different ways. And the poems are, well, they're fairly surrealist poems, and they're about kind of extreme and wasted situations where people are kind of hanging on in the ruins and that kind of thing. And yeah, they're about sort of impossible unions against odds and in dream landscapes and so on, which I guess is Mars. You can't get a more dream landscape or a more distant place to put your story. However banal the story is, it's still taking place on Mars.
Yeah.